Good evening. This is the Walpole Zoning Board of Appeals. Tonight is November 1st, 2023, 7 p.m. at Town Hall. We have three cases in front of us tonight. The first case is case number 22-11, Wall Street Development Corporation for 9 and 15 Pinnacle Drive, Chapter 40B, for the construction of 28 home ownership, non-age restricted condominium townhouses. This was last continued from September 6, 2023. The applicant has submitted a request for a 60-day continuation, as well as an extension of time until April 26, 2024. At the request of the applicant, can I please have a motion to continue case number 22-11 until January 3rd, 2024, as well as grant an extension of time until April 26, 2024?
Motion?
Motion by Tim, second by Dave. Voting on this will be Tim, Dave Anderson, myself, Bob Fitzgerald, Mark Major. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Excuse me. The next case we'll be hearing is case number 22-22, Neponset Village, 5 Pleasant Street, for a comprehensive permit pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40B, Section 20 through 23, as amended, to allow the construction of 24 townhouses-style condominiums within 7 buildings. This is on remand from the Housing Appeals Committee and was last continued from September 18th, 2023. Is the applicant here? Please step forward, identify yourself for the board.
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman. Phil Mackey, 1256 Washington Street, Norwood, Massachusetts. As counsel for and on behalf of the applicant, is with me is Damian Dimitric, and I probably screwed that up, but he's the engineer on the project. And that's it for the applicant this evening. As far as the information we have for you, I assume Pat has shared the peer review response, which we received last week. At first blush, it all seems to make sense and look fine, but we clearly haven't had time to go through and make the plans. So we will be asking for a continuance to do that and submit them back to the peer review, et cetera, to finish that process. But turn it over to the engineer. He can give you a fairly high-level view. Again, we don't think there are any issues, but we haven't redone the plans yet, so you're going to be getting another set and hopefully a clean letter by the time we're here again.
Yeah, so Damian Dimitric, Conoco Engineers and Scientists for First Street, Bridgewater, Massachusetts, here on behalf of Neponset Village LLC, the engineer and designer of plans. You know, the plans that you have in front of you just show additional detail from the preliminary set. Nothing, no major changes. You know, we just added demo plans, grading and drainage, just some more detail to the plans, but nothing that really changes the plans in any major, you know, aesthetically or how it works out in that way. You know, with the adjustments were per the town comments that we had previously received, and, you know, they're generally same number of units, same layout, you know, added information regarding grading, drainage, utilities, and things to that extent. We, as Phil just mentioned, we received the peer review letter and town comments last week, preliminary reviewed from our standpoint, from an engineering standpoint, nothing major. Here, we'd like to request permission from the board to coordinate directly with the peer review engineer, just to make it easy engineer to resolve any of those engineering type issues. And then additionally, as Phil said, we'd like to, you know, request that continuance to the next December 6th meeting, I believe December 6th meeting, according to the meeting schedule that I saw online. You know, and, you know, with all of that said, I'd happy to respond to any specific questions on the project, if there's any regarding the design, you know, anything like that. But as Phil said, we're, you know, be coming back to you with some slightly revised plans just to clean up the stuff per the peer review.
I don't have any specific questions right now. I do have some questions regarding the peer review of the drawing set, and maybe if you want to walk us through what you have for comments and what your findings were. Yeah.
Didn't know you were here. Good evening, everybody. Sean Reardon, the board's peer reviewer for civil and traffic. So really, initial takeaways, really well done set of plans. So, I mean, it's rare that I work through as much detail as I worked through and found sort of very few substantive comments. I mean, everything was done from the grading to the way it was modeled in stormwater. I think most of our issues are sort of the minor in nature, but recognizing that it is a dense site, right? I mean, it's a 40B project. There really isn't much left over. So it's one of these cases where the premium is high because there's really no opportunity to fix things later. There's not much left. That being said, right, they have a second means of access. They have a looped water main. The engineering was done really well. All the grading works. So I think it was well thought. We did have some questions, mostly related to sort of, there's things sitting on top of the infiltration systems, which traditionally we wouldn't see. Like to see some clarity on what that is, or maybe perhaps something reconsidered there. There are several infiltration systems. So if it's not building parking, it's probably an infiltration system. So it means we just got to make sure we have all those details. And importantly too is make sure that we have a plan in place for operation and maintenance of these systems. Now, as far as I know, this project isn't near any resource areas, so it won't be getting reviewed by the Concom. Typically, Concom will do like a more beefy review of stormwater in construction period erosion controls. It pretty much falls to you guys, so we're taking that on our shoulders as, you know, to make sure that we cover that more completely since Concom's not there to back us up. But that being said, I think the plans are all, you know, in really good shape. The comments that we have are addressable. We just got to work through the details.
I noticed you had mentioned the gazebo that was over the infiltration system. I mean, is that kind of what challenges does that pose as far as, you said in your letter that you don't normally see some structures placed over that, and I'm curious.
Yeah, typically we won't just say don't do that. We'll to be diplomatic, we'll say, can you explain why it's there and how you're going to solve these problems? So, you know, I mean, it's a structure. Maybe you're just putting it up on blocks or something like that, but then I'd ask the question of, well, how are you going to keep them in place when the wind blows? I would expect them to reconsider that, but, you know, they might have a solution that's plausible, but I've never seen a structure that size on top of an infiltration system, so it's going to be a pretty tall climb if they're going to try and keep it there. Same with the mailboxes and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, the dumpster certainly kind of caught my attention in the location of that and the infiltration system underneath and any sort of runoff from the dumpster, potentially. I don't know if that's even a potential or not. But
No, it's more of a concern for, you know, these things might, I mean, I just finished replacing a system last week. So at some point in time, they might need to be replaced or they might need to be cleaned. Anything you have permanent on top of them is only a hindrance to that. So traditionally, you wouldn't see permanent fixtures on top of an infiltration system.
I like the idea that they have that outdoor recreational space of a gazebo and the fire pit and stuff like that. I'd hate to see them remove that just simply over kind of an engineering question or anything like that. And I'm just wondering if there's ways that they can work around trying to still provide that sort of outdoor recreation space and still.
I mean, the good news about having all the infiltration systems, a lot of open grass space, right? So and you won't look into the site and see an infiltration system. You'll see grass. So I think there's plenty of space on the edge of it that we can probably work some similar amenity in. It'll be up to us to work it out with them. I also don't see the downside of sort of pulling in the gazebo sort of to the side a little bit so that you have more open grass area, which to me, growing up, if you want to play touch football or something like that, you need a little bit of open space. So I don't think any of these changes are going to result in a loss of an amenity, but we got to think it through a little bit more.
Excuse me. On one of the drawings I saw, there was a flared end section that was like in the back corner of it was an outlet from various drainage manholes, I believe.
Yep.
Is that common that they would park that as far off in the corner of their property, kind of outletting to adjacent properties?
Yeah, in this case it would, because that's where the natural drainage course goes. So there's a ditch that runs along this side of the railroad track. So all the water from the site it ends up going in that direction. So really, all they're doing is putting the water back where it would have gone otherwise. That being said, these infiltration systems are big because there's not a lot of runoff coming off that site right now. So I wouldn't expect, and I think the analysis will support this, I don't even think there's a discharge coming out of there until you get above a 25-year storm. So you shouldn't be seeing any water coming out of that flared end. You might see water coming off because the ditch still exists along the side of the railroad. So there's still going to be water along the side of the railroad that's going to come down and join with that flared end section. But very little water coming out of that because most of it will be stored and infiltrated in the systems on site.
The other thing I noticed was on some of the existing drawings, it had showed borings in various locations throughout the site. Can you just walk me through maybe, and some people here who may have the question is what are they necessary to keep? Are they purposeful in any manner?
Yeah, they're super critical because basically these infiltration systems, they rely on the water stored in the space that they create, and then it infiltrates into the ground. So you have to know the characteristics of the soils. So the way you do that is you dig holes all around the site to determine whether it's a gravelly or a silty soil, so basically to figure out how much water is allowed to go through it, and then also to figure out how much separation you have between sort of your ground and the infiltration system and groundwater to make sure you have enough separation to meet standards. So those are super critical. Usually the first thing we see, if we don't see those, it's like, timeout, you don't have enough information to justify the numbers they use in your design. In this case, they have really good coverage, really fairly uniform soil conditions. All the numbers that they applied in their analysis were what we would expect to see. So that's all really good information and complete and thorough.
The only other comment I thought, and I think it's more back and forth with the fire department, is the location of the access gate off of McGuire. And I also know that their snow storage area is proposed to be along that area as well. Again, this might be more of a question for fire department or something like that, but location of that, is there anything that from your perspective could be potentially troublesome as far as having that gate in that location and providing access to their maintenance or, grounds?
I wouldn't say troublesome. I think it's important that it's put in a location that makes sense for everybody, because I think there's different opinions. So when I first saw it, I was like, ooh, interesting place. I would have put it at the end of McGuire so that you don't get people parking in there. But then I saw some of the correspondence that said the fire chief had asked for it to be there. So I would defer to, frankly, to the chief most, because, and then maybe to the police department, because people, if people want to park back there and, get into trouble, who knows, right? So it's at its location right now. I don't see any downside for it, because what it does is a long length of that access road is available to get access to that snow storage area. There's enough room at the end to turn like a snowplow around. And I remember talking to Carl Baldoff about, he kind of liked having that gate where it was, because it allowed his plow trucks to go in, turn around, and come back out, rather than, because it's a pretty tight street, rather than having to sort of figure out a way to get out of there once they plow up that street. So I think there's a lot of consensus as to that being the best location, but certainly we'd probably want them to confirm that before you commit to it.
I lied, there was one other thing I had. The fire truck turning radius, I noticed that when it was entering the property on the proposed new entrance, there was a small overlap of lanes, crossover of the lanes. I mean, is that common, or is there something that they could maybe open their entrance a little bit wider so that there isn't that kind of crossing over lanes?
This is probably one of the tougher things to sort of balance, right? Because in order to eliminate that from happening, you have to make big radii. So then you're increasing the amount of distance that people have to cross a driveway, you're increasing the amount of pavement. So we try to work with the fire chief to strike a good balance there, recognizing that, if they're responding to a fire, they've got lights on, or if they're responding to some emergency, they've got lights on, they've got sirens on. Really not atypical to see them having to cross a line for a few feet. But again, that's the fire chief. What we typically do is try to sort of call out these issues to make sure the chief is noticing everything, because he's got a full-time job fighting fires, right? He's not reviewing plans. So usually when they take a look at it, they see some things, but they don't see everything. We try to sort of call everything to their attention and then put it on their plate to sort of reconcile and resolve. But what they show is pretty robust access. Even if something were to happen at the emergency egress, there's even a leg on the opposite side of the driveway that they could back into if they had to. So a lot of sort of robustness to that access solution.
Is there any other board members that have questions currently?
Question. On the topic of density, you mentioned already like the gazebo and the dumpster pad being above the infiltration systems. You also had a comment about sewer and water mains being located in close proximity to one another for one of the units at least. And I don't know if you could elaborate on that a little bit and whether or not, some of these amenities could be placed in locations perhaps where a unit is shown now or a block of units is shown that would sort of rationalize and not cause these conflicts between infiltration, structures above infiltration, proximity of water and sewer lines, and those types of things.
I think density feeds into everything, because when you're at this level of density, any shortfall, right, it manifests itself as a problem forever, because there's really no opportunity to solve it, whether it's a lack of a bike rack or something like that. I think certainly density is worth looking at, because, I mean, some of these units are pretty close to the property line. And there's really not even room enough to put a sort of a tree line in there or any kind of buffering there. The sewer issue is a little bit sort of unrelated to density. It's more of recognizing that, water and sewer generally don't mix, right?
Right.
So you typically want to maintain at least 10 feet of separation between the two and eliminate crossings as much as possible. So their current layout has a series of crossings of the water line that we propose some alternate solution that could reduce the number of crossings and also increase separation. But I wouldn't consider that much of a density discussion. That's more of a routing discussion and an efficiency discussion.
No, thank you.
But stormwater is definitely a density discussion. I mean, those two, the infiltration, density, all those things are, absolutely interconnected.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Mr. Reardon, you mentioned in one section of your review that if any of the units were going to be handicapped accessible or allowed to become handicapped accessible in the future. Is that something we should be addressing or asking the applicant to explain, or?
Yeah, so what prompted that question is looking at the finished floors of all the buildings. They're a couple feet higher than grade.
Right.
There were handicap spaces shown, but no ramps or anything like that.
Correct,
And the buildings are pretty tight to that back of sidewalk. So, clearly there's enough room for stairs to transition 2 feet, but whether or not there was room for a ramp to transition 2 feet, I think that still left some question in my mind whether, that was doable given the density and given the layout. So what we were asking for is just a little bit more clarity. Frankly, I don't know what the requirement is for if any of these units have to be handicapped accessible, or looking for more of a clarity for how they pick those particular spots and how they expect them to be used.
Right, and also if there's future space or way to adapt if someone is in there and becomes, disabled or something, they want to stay where they are, so.
Right, good question. So I think probably maybe we'll take it even a little bit further than what we thought, because frankly, any of these could end up needing to be accessible, right? So, maybe we got to think about that a little bit more.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
is it okay if the applicant might speak at this point, or we want to
Yeah,
wait?
if the applicant
Do
has
you have
something to add
anything
to
to say
that.
about the accessibility? Anyone?
Certainly, Tammy can chime in as well from an engineering standpoint, but at least it's our belief currently, and we'll certainly look into this to make sure that I'm not misspeaking. These are all ownership units, and effectively they're treated as single-family homes, so there's not going to be a requirement per se. But just in parking lots in general, there is a handicap requirement. Having been on a scooter and crutches and a variety of things myself, I am well aware that that is not the ideal answer, but that may be what ends up happening here. And as they are ownership, were I a wheelchair-bound person, I wouldn't buy into it. But certainly if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an adequate response. We'll look into opportunities to, make it accessible as necessary and within reason, but, as Phil says, I think from our understanding, and again, apologize, it's not a requirement at the
Right,
time for us to meet those standards.
Yeah, no, I wasn't looking for a requirement. I was just
Yeah,
looking for,
yeah.
like, the handicap space and the grade differences. Is a wheelchair person going to be able to leave the handicap space?
Currently, as shown,
Up.
a wheelchair will not be able to make it up the steps into the home.
No, not the steps, I'm
Yeah.
saying, yeah.
Yeah, there is accessible access onto the curbing, through multiple locations, particularly located near the accessible parking locations and everything to that extent. But access into the buildings, is not, necessarily required at the time.
Yeah, just to be clear, the site is accessible, right? The sidewalks and
Okay.
access from the parking spaces to the units and to the mailboxes. The issue is transitioning the grade from the sidewalk up into the unit.
Right,
And
no,
that
yeah.
requires some space that might not be there.
Right, okay. No, I get that. I know that, I see the steps going in. I just want to make sure that from the parking spaces that you're allotting, it's accessible to get to the units, okay? That's Kim. I'm not in charge.
Building commissioner,
We're lucky enough to have the building commissioner to speak behalf on that.
Yeah, Jim Crowley, Building Commissioner. The Handicap Accessibility Board kicks in depending on the use. So if these are rental units, it is different than if they're personally bought, they're single-family homes. So as Mr. Mackey said, if they're being sold as individual units, then there is no handicap accessibility requirement. If they were rental units, then it would come into play, but being sold, there is no requirement.
Is that all you had, Judy?
Yes, I'm done, thank you.
Does anyone have anything else want to add? Before I open it up to the public? Is there anyone from the public that'd like to ask a question or speak on behalf of this project?
In general or regarding peer review?
I would like it to be curtailed to the engineering, but in general is fine.
Yes. Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Phil O'Connell, I represent John Gass, who lives at 7 Pleasant. He's a direct abutter. So, appreciate the board's time, and I just want to make a few comments, and I understand that the hearing's going to be continued, and it sounds like the plan's going to be revised, and Mr. Reardon's going to review those plans. So I understand, just with respect, some general points that we'd ask the board to consider. My client lives, he's a direct abutter, so he's got 4 of the units backing up to his property line. I think Mr. Mackey's looking for a waiver. I think he's about 17 feet from his house, his rear property line. So just to the overall density, I think that the history of this project was mentioned at the last meeting. I think the applicant had applied for a special permit for, might have been 12 units. Some of them got approved. They didn't go forward with it. So now, from my client's perspective, he's really concerned about the density, obviously. He's a direct abutter. He's going to be right near the infiltration system. It seems like, given the density, the length of the road, that there's too many units. And I know site control is looked at by Mass Housing, but there's a lot of moving pieces here. I think Arbor Court is what, semi-paved? Or
Paved. The McGuire Park.
I'm sorry, I apologize, McGuire Park is semi-paved, so the engineer had referenced that they want, they want some, they want McGuire Park to be renovated. The water loop, I think, is coming in off McGuire or Arbor Court. So as far as site control goes, I know the board doesn't typically look at it, and I believe McGuire Park is public, although it doesn't seem to be all the way paved. Arbor Court, I think, is, I'm not sure it's public. But my client's biggest concern, and we expected that Tetra Tech was going to address the environmental issues. They didn't. We'd respectfully request that they take a look at it, especially in light of what's going on in Certainty. And we know Certainty is in Norwood, but it's right on the line. There's been, there's numerous environmental concerns. My client can speak to the issues of what happens in the summer with dust plumes, cars are coated. They manufacture asphalt shingles, as everyone probably knows. So there's really some serious air quality concerns. My client's concerned about water quality. And I don't know if it's something that Mr. Reardon, that you typically address, but we'd respectfully request it. I think Mr. Mackey had mentioned maybe there was a Phase 1 done. It'd be great if we could see the Phase 1, if the board could see the Phase 1, if Mr. Reardon could see the Phase 1. I just Googled, Certainty. I understand it's in Norwood, but I Googled Certainty, the DEP, Energy and Environmental Affairs. I see waste site reportable releases, one from 2019, which involves fuel oil. There was another one from 2005, which involves phosphorus acid. If I may, Mr. Chairman, if I could just submit these, Mr. Mackey a copy, but just for the board's consideration, I appreciate it. Thank you. So just it goes to the underlying issue of the environmental concerns. It looks like there is a small parcel triangle that is in Norwood. So we don't have a clear response on how that's being addressed. I don't know. I think it's being used for frontage. We don't know if Mr. Mackey can speak to this, but is there Norwood permitting involved? I believe it's in a. I think it's in a manufacturing. Correct me, I could be wrong, but there is a small Norwood parcel there. So has the applicant gone in front of the Norwood boards? What do their bylaws say about this potential mixed use? Again, even though it's a small sliver, we understand, and that the access road and the condos are in Walpole. But I think it's something that should really be addressed. Mr. Chairman, my client's really concerned about the phasing. Again, with the potential mitigation and McGuire Park, if engineering is going to require that they do some work there with respect to the emergency access, the water loop. He's rightfully concerned, is not sure how long it's going to go on for. So he'd like, and this could be addressed, but how is the phasing going to go with building units, he's also concerned about the drainage. But, he's concerned this could go on potentially for who knows how many years, especially if there's going to be road work done on McGuire Park. And we hope, if the board is going to consider this, that, and I think the neighbors, McGuire Park, can address it better than I can. But if there's major improvements there, we could foresee this project going on for years. Again, my client's concerned about the infiltration system. He's right there. The clear cutting is really going to be an issue. So we don't have any idea how many trees are going to be cut down. Not that we typically see that, but my client's really concerned about the removal of all these trees and how it's going to affect and how it's going to exacerbate the current environmental conditions. So we're hoping that the board and the applicant would have Mr. Reardon really take a look at that, take a look at the environmental concerns. And again, we're glad that the hearing's going to be continued. So those are just some of the general issues that we hope that the board would address. And we really appreciate the board's time this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, do you want me to answer any of that, or?
If you have something to add to that, yeah, sure.
Well, he asked a couple of questions.
Just through the
I'll
board.
keep it as
Through the
close
board
as
is
I
all.
can. Absolutely,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman. So as I said, I think in our first hearing, which was now several months ago, back when we had a different project, the 12 condominium units under 40A in front of your board, we were asked a bunch of questions, and one of those was very specific about the Norwood parcel. At that time, we needed that frontage to have a conforming lot. The question was referred to town council. I submitted a brief. I believe Attorney Blair at the time was representing Mr. Gass. He submitted information. KP Law reviewed it. The long and short of it, because it took multiple meetings to go through, was that it was allowed to be used as frontage, regardless of the fact that it was a light manufacturing zone. Mr. O'Connell was correct. With the proviso under 40A that nothing could be done in that triangle. So it was left completely wooded, the driveway was moved over, the sidewalk was taken off of that side. And at that point, for a 40A application, KP Law said it passed muster, and you know, if your boards chose to see fit to grant the relief, they could. Fast forward to where we are today, under 40B, we could either go with that route, because I believe we are leaving that parcel completely untouched, because quite frankly, it's just easier not to talk about it. But under 40B, we could simply add that to our request of waivers that we're looking for to make this economically feasible, because if we can't have access, that absolutely would stop the project. So there's two ways to cut the decision, if you will. And as you know, your deliberations go on, we can certainly accommodate either. As far as permitting, again, back when this was a 40A project, I went to the town of Norwood, had to talk with the building commissioner, and they determined as long as there was no work being done in Norwood, they wanted nothing to do with this, and there was no permitting, no hearing, no nothing. And that was also provided to the board at that time. I'm happy to go through my files and submit that as a additional information for this project. The analysis, I do believe, is completely different. This is 40B, not 40A. But nonetheless, all of Mr. O'Connell's questions were asked, and KP Law gave a opinion, which the board at that time saw fit to follow. As far as McGuire Court goes, just again to reiterate, it was then and is still the intention at the request of the town to upgrade the water line. I forget what inch to what inch, but to adequately serve both the houses and the project as part of the loop. And unless Carl changes his mind, the plan is still currently to repave the entire layout of the road. I would say curb to curb, but there really isn't a curb. But whatever Carl lays out as this is where he wants pavement is what we're going to agree to. And I would expect that to be part of the decision. So, and then finally, so I don't screw it up, McGuire is public, Arbor is private, and that is why everything we propose as far as the project goes is on McGuire, because it's a town road, whereas Arbor is not. Hopefully that helps.
May I ask a follow-up? On the question of the Phase 1 report, are you aware of whether there's been such a report done on the property?
I think there has, but I'm not entirely sure. If we have, I'm happy to give it to you.
Okay.
Do you know?
And I guess with the couple of release events that were mentioned, I don't know if those are contained within the CertainTeed site or whether they migrated or not, but presumably that Phase 1 would address that if it was posted.
Presumably.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the current applicant bought the property in between my last appearance here 5 years ago. And he financed it, so common sense is telling me there's a Phase 1 out there, but I haven't personally seen it.
Okay.
So let me take a look, and if we can get it for you, we absolutely will.
I'd appreciate that, thank you.
Yes, no problem.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, thanks, Attorney Mackey. Just to follow.
If you could just stand up to the
Yeah, thanks.
microphone so they can.
And Attorney Mackey may be able to provide, so as far as the 2016 KP memo, if we could have access to it, or if the board could, that'd be that'd be great. And then, as far as the Norwood zoning, if there, again, is there determination currently from anyone in Norwood, not from 2016, that zoning is not required? Is it something the board would be interested in seeing as far as, having different town boundaries for zoning? So I don't know if that is something that the applicant has requested. Have they requested anything from the town with respect to the 40B application? I know, Attorney Mack, you had mentioned you had something from 2016 when it was a special permit. Is that something that, yeah, would the town, I guess, can the board request from the applicant that, in fact, Norwood zoning, current Norwood zoning is not required?
We're reviewing a project that has a permit within the town of Walpole. I don't know that we would necessarily, correct me if I'm wrong, but
It's really not applicable.
I can't see that we're going to pull Norwood's zoning
No, I understand, yep.
into the discussion.
I mean, the memo mentioned by KP Law, we can find that for the previous case, but the project's entirely within Walpole. It's really not applicable to Norwood zoning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and then my client is also concerned about, not address new areas, but I think that the dumpster was mentioned near his property, so at some point, he just wants to make sure, those issues are addressed also. So, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
My name's Greg Nyland, 11 McGuire Park. I'm a direct abutter on multiple sides of construction within the current plan. I just want to say, first off, thank you for all the abutters that are here today. I mean, pretty good turnout. Obviously, there's a lot of concern with the impact of what this construction can do to the neighborhood. So just thank you for everybody for being here. I think I'll just start first and foremost. Outside looking in, you don't even need to be part of the neighborhood, but if you show this plan to somebody, it is so overtly overcrowded and so just obviously close to boundaries. You can tell that, again, I'm just speaking from my, again, I'm not an expert with this by any means, but they are using McGuire Park as a road to fit in as many units as possible. So I would like to ask, just what is the true benefit of the town and the neighborhood for them to, go through McGuire Park and have us not be able to have trash pickup, not be able to use our driveway for a period of time while they do the streets, not be able to have, parties, get-togethers, everything. Our life is essentially on hold until this construction is through for everybody in McGuire Park in the direct abutters. So really concerned with just using McGuire Park in general, but the overcrowding of the units seems ridiculous in my mind. In July, I wasn't expecting to speak, right? I came up here and kind of just, I had my butter letter, had some concerns. With the updated plans, I don't see any updates, right? I mean, obviously, yes, there was, new studies done and, more forms and things were done to make sure everything's all set. But as far as I'm concerned, like from top level view, it's the exact same plan. They're clear cutting everything. They're putting in as many units as possible. And they're still going through McGuire Park, which obviously puts the direct abutters a very tough position. A couple things. Obviously, with overcrowded, that's one thing that everybody's going to bring up, and it's a major concern. Really, with how tight the units are and where it's located. Right, when you're looking at the plans, or if the state's looking at these plans, or whatever outside groups, they're not seeing what's around the area. Right, it's against a railroad track that has height, so that's going to be higher and a hill for everybody that's living in those units. There's a direct, obviously, auto body shop, certainteed. And all that's going to be visible now from the duration of all the construction, which is a major concern, and who is honestly going to want to buy those units at a premium in this market. So just want to address that. Do want to obviously talk about just the traffic congestion. I think the peer review mentioned it, talking about the traffic report that was done over the pandemic. I was lucky enough, I work remotely. I work from my home, for almost every day of the week. And I was lucky to go to the gym a little early because I knew this was coming tonight. So 5:30, the traffic from the intersection of Union Street and Pleasant was past McGuire, right? So that was not the case during the pandemic. When the traffic study was done, there is a lot more traffic in the area. So I think a new traffic study would need to get done at some point. already talked about the concerns about the clear cutting of the wooded area. I mean, again, just seeing, it's a lot, it's like we keep talking about Norwood, and it's all right there, and there's not much we can do, because those abutters, I don't think they're gonna ever show up to these meetings, right? I mean, we have businesses, and we have a major corporation in Certainteed. They're not too concerned about, what's happening in Walpole. So, obviously, the clear cutting is a concern that obviously want to address, and just the proximity of the industrial zone. Again, with the overcrowding of the area, there is part of the area, right, that's not being built on, is the strip behind McGuire Park, and there's a portion in Norwood that's included, right? And the exception, one of the exceptions that they're looking for, is literally double the amount of units for the square footage currently. Double the amount of units, which is, I don't know, if I don't have a history, you guys obviously do. If there's any project like that that's moved forward, within Walpole. So, I mean, I just really don't see the benefit of the town or the neighborhood of going through McGuire Park. So thank you for hearing that out. I'm not sure if I didn't see it posted online, but I don't know if there's a new, the fire department took a look.
Not yet.
Their party, not yet. Okay, great. I'm sure they will. I just want to say again about the tightness of how close we are to that road that would be constructed on the current plan in McGuire Park. I am 12 feet from asphalt. From the front stair of my house to McGuire Park, that's 12 and a half feet. So we are right on top of it. This is a very unique situation, in my opinion, with this project, where there is multiple abutters that will have construction on both sides of their multiple sides of their houses. 2 to 3 sides of the property lines. So we are going to be sitting, for the duration of the construction, we are going to be sitting in a construction zone. And again, talking about putting your life on hold, even if we wanted to sell our house, we're not going to be able to. We're going to be stuck there for the duration until this thing's complete. So just again, very, very concerned about just the project in general, honestly. So I just want to thank you guys for hearing my my quick high level points. Obviously I think we could probably all go in here in a little bit more detail, but it is Wednesday night and people have things to go and more people want to talk, obviously. So thank you guys. As someone who is now first time homeowner, this is my first house I've ever had. Lived there for 5 years now. Obviously love Walpole, but I mean this is the first time I've had to go through this. And it's great to be able to talk to you guys as Walpole locals, right? All you guys live in Walpole. You have empathy of our situation. So just want to say thank you for just hearing us out, as local Walpole residents as well. Thanks.
Thank you.
Board, my name is Seth Williams. I'm at 15 McGuire Park, the lucky owner at the end of McGuire Park. The hammerhead on the drawing. I was actually here with Mr. Gass. We actually both were working with Attorney Blair on the 40A project back in 2018, which is kind of crazy to think about how long that's been. I'll be short. I will say that when the 40A project was up with McSherry Construction and Attorney Mackey in June of 2018, one of the last meetings right before some of the laws changed on the side yard and the backyard and all that in that time frame in Walpole, the project team said, if you decline this 40A, we'll be back with 40B. And the committee took offense to that and says, be careful with what you're saying. You can't threaten something like that. Here we are 5 years later with 40B. So I think we're disappointed. We lost 3 neighbors. 3 houses on McGuire flipped. So that's why we have our lovely new neighbors. We have Greg and Thomas and a couple of others that have moved in. They all left because of this first project. So the impact on McGuire is great. And you may see a ripple effect again, which would probably benefit this project if everyone moved out. But I just wanted to state that for the record, that this first project, which was less dense, didn't enter McGuire Park. It came and exited Pleasant, had a huge impact on the neighborhood. So that's what my opening comments. For engineering, thank you, Mr. Reardon, for what you went over. The most impactful sentence, I think, in this peer review is on the first page where it says the project represents a very dense development of the site, leaving little, if no, so I'll rephrase that. It's a very dense development on the site, leaving no practical options for addressing any unforeseen future needs while presenting significant short-term construction challenges, and even a small change could impact the layout. So I just wanted to say that out loud. That hit me. I know this just came in a couple days ago, but that's how the abutters feel. We just feel like it's 10 pounds of sand in a, whatever the expression is, in whatever size bucket. We also, I think the last meeting, there was a question on the pricing of houses, the market value of these houses, and it was kind of challenged that they may have been out of date. I haven't seen a new market adjustment, knowing that prices are way up, rates are really high, and whether or not the 40B for however many houses, if it's even going to be worth the value, if the calculations are correct. So I'd be interested in seeing that. And then from an engineering question for the chief, and I know that they haven't had a chance to review, for the egress coming onto McGuire, appreciate the fact that the cutover is now 20 feet wide. We saw surveyors out there surveying McGuire. McGuire, on the average, is about 17 feet wide, property to property. When you look at the plan, the site plans on site page 4 of these plans and 5, it shows that the full width, the legal width of the street goes onto private property. You'll see lines on page 4 from Norwood Engineering and page 5 where the lines actually go onto the bushes of the houses there, the straight line. So you're talking a 17-foot street, and in the winter, I'm gonna guess 14. The snow berms on either side. So the letter submitted by Alan and Deborah Williams, I think Patrick may have just attached it yesterday or the day before, has measurements, not taken by a surveyor, but just the reality of what the measurements are at different increments down the street. Just wanted to state that so the chief could see that, yes, they have control over constructing the egress road where the gate's gonna be, but they have no control over McGuire Park. It is what it is. And so the chief has to realize, like, it wouldn't be an acceptable lane for the fire truck. Now, you may say, we live in McGuire, how does the fire truck get to us? That's fine. We're 2 houses. My 90-year-old grandmother lived with us. The ambulance came often. They had to come straight in and back straight out McGuire. Same with the fire trucks. So I am nervous if my house caught on fire. Never mind if they have to use this to come and go for another 20 units with X number of people and more risks of fire, emergencies and so forth. So just wanted to state a couple of things there. I want to save my other comments for, the continuance to see the new plans, but just wanted to open up with that. So I really appreciate everyone's time.
Appreciate that.
Hi, my name is Alan Williams. I also live at 15 McGuire Park. That was my son. I thought I'd let him go first. I just want to mention, I work for a geotechnical engineering firm for 30 years. I'm the one who measured the street. I know how to measure a street. I used 100-foot surveyor's tape. I did not have a digital survey, digital transit, but I think I'm accurate to within about an inch. I measured pavement, edge of pavement to edge of pavement. There's no curb, there's no sidewalk, and there's a slight natural berm of grass that comes down to that edge of pavement. They never plow in the winter to the edge of pavement, so it's even narrower in the winter. When the trash is out, you get the picture. When we have friends over for, folks have holidays, birthdays, we park on the street because there's not enough room in our driveways. Can't park on Pleasant Street, so we park there. If there was an emergency, there's no way any apparatus could get through. You say, well, what does it do now? My son mentioned, well, they back down. You say, well, if they can do it now, why can't they do it when Neponset is built? That's 24 more units. The likelihood, picture a fire apparatus going into Neponset. How do they exit if we have something going on McGuire Park? We have a nice quiet street, 100-year-old homes. I mentioned before, the kids ride their bikes and scooters on the street. It's so quiet. That's all going to end. If this project is approved in its current form with McGuire Park, McGuire Park will become a driveway of convenience. It will become, in my opinion, a thoroughfare. The gate will stay open. Do you think a delivery truck to Neponset Village is going to use the turnaround that they've engineered there and go back out Pleasant Street? No. They'll come right through McGuire Park. It's already started. Some delivery trucks just whiz down our street to go beyond into Arbor Court. It's already started. So all I'm saying is, to me, the elephant in the room is the number of units that are being built that require McGuire Park to be a second means of egress, as opposed to fewer units with a cul-de-sac, which would not impact us anywhere near as much. Now, I don't know if 40B, it's already resolved. We have no say. I don't know. I'm just telling you, please be aware of the impact that this will have on our lives going forward. It will completely change the character of McGuire Park. And the rest I'll leave till the continuance, because I want to ask about the photometric plan, lighting, what do you call it, shrub cover. You know, if this is going to be built, we have other concerns, but I don't want to waste the board's time. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else from the public like to speak? Applicant, do you have any comments regarding any of the concerns you heard?
Not at this time, no.
Anyone from the board have anything you want to add?
I guess I'd just make, oh,
Yep, please. Just if you don't mind, can you step to the podium and introduce yourself?
My name's Thomas Kafalis. I live at 8 McGuire Park. I bought this house 3 years ago because it was on 2 dead ends, knowing that I'd have a family of 2 kids. And I have another neighbor that bought a house adjacent to me because he has 2 kids. And our kids play together on the street all the time. We don't have much yard space. I think about the average on that street is like 4,000 to 5,000 square feet. So most of our playground is that street. If this goes through, where do our kids play? Like, I'm not gonna send my 3 and 7-year-old down to Bird Park by themselves, and likewise, the other people wouldn't either. So it really is an inconvenience to a lot of people trying to like build a home, knowing that I probably wouldn't have bought my house in this section of Walpole knowing that this was gonna go on. And now I'm stuck not being able to do anything about it. Just wanna let you guys think about that, because I'm sure you have kids or would have kids or have had kids. Understand that if that's what you had to do with, you wouldn't want this to go on. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, just procedurally, who's voting on this? Who's at the first hearing? Do we, I just want to make sure I understand who's.
Eligible to vote?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all the, myself, Rob, Dave, and Judy are all eligible.
All right.
And John is absent tonight, but I believe he'll be able to mull in.
If he wishes to.
Back.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I would like to speak to just a few of the abutter concerns related to the access through McGuire Park. It is gated and will be separated from our development. That gate will be accessible by the fire department to, go up and down and turn around. So you speak of concerns with the ambulances turning around, they have to back out. The ambulances will be able to go to the end of the street, turn around in McGuire, but none of our residents will have access through your street. It's not going to increase traffic flow.
If you could just come through the board.
Sorry, I apologize. So for that, concern, I understand, that, concern playing in the streets and everything like that, but the traffic for the project will not be routed through McGuire Park. The main access will be through its own main access on Pleasant Street The gated area will assist in turning around of plows, ambulances, emergency vehicles of all sorts for McGuire Park, but our residents won't have any benefit from that. They will not be going through that road. So, just to make sure that that's clear, it does seem to be a concern, and I would like to address
Can you
that.
speak to what is the construction that is proposed on McGuire? Because I understand it, but I think there's probably some questions. I
Yeah.
think it's, the water line is,
Yeah, the water line and everything, the construction that will occur on that will occur probably towards the beginning of the project to appease the board and everything to that extent. Will be, replacing the water line, so digging up, there will be detour and access gates, they'll be putting down plates and safety stuff so that people can get into their houses and do live their lives during that time. That part of the process is, so it's replacing the water line. That will be done in sections through the course of McGuire Park, and then the final, and then you'll just be final repaving. So again, detour plans will be set up in place. It's not, that's not going to be occurring throughout the entirety of the building of the project. It will only be during the time that is necessary for that roadway. So, that's just the simple, milling and paving, or as requested by Carl, whatever the town sees fit. For the pavement there, so again, done in sections, paving, they do miles of highway in a day, it's not an extreme process. The replacement of the water line will be longer, but access, the crews will have thick metal plates. You drive over them all the time when you're going down streets, that will be there to, during the replacement of the water line. And again, it'll be done, as coordinated with the town engineer and, to maintain accessibility for those residents.
you're not currently proposing to bring any, I think I saw in your drawings, your construction access, your washout pad is actually where the permanent entrance will be. You're not proposing to bring any equipment or any workers or anything through that McGuire Road?
Yeah, not on a regular basis. The main access will be through that. That's where the crushed stone will be to prevent, sediment from going on the roads and getting into the other, that is our proposed main access. Construction phasing plans, we do have access to that street. I'm not gonna forbid us at this point in time from using that in any way, shape, or form, but that is not the proposed access. We do not, to get access to do test pits, I believe, maybe our excavator dropped his equipment at the end of that street to get access to do test pits on our property. It made it more convenient rather than, dropping the piece of equipment in Pleasant Street, the main road, right? So, the main construction will be through the front entrance on Pleasant Street, and that will be the majority of the construction vehicle traffic.
I think, and it was touched upon by Mr. Reardon, the construction phasing plan is going to be pretty important just to help transparency to a lot of the abutters and help bring clarity for what our ultimate ruling might be. And where it is such a congested site, I think it would certainly help to have those details dialed in. I know that's usually not something that's required till you get your building permit, but getting ahead of that and being transparent and communicating that plan to abutters and to this board will certainly help any decision that comes in the future. So that'd be definitely something to look at, as along with the lighting plan, and I think there was a request for a plantings plan too. I could be wrong about that.
There's already one in there.
Yeah.
Okay, my
Yeah.
apologies, yeah.
Understood, and yeah, photometrics are coming, we have those, they'll be submitted with the next revision. We want to, that was preliminarily done, we'll get the photometrics into you, and again, additional construction detail on the phasing will be supplied with the next revision.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions from the board? Oh, sure. Just state your name again for the record.
Seth Williams, 15 McGuire Park. I don't think it was uploaded, but I added a couple of photos of when the pit sites were dug and the heavy machinery dropped off. So love your question about what's the construction rollout for McGuire. And in those pictures, I included just the 3 or 4 construction vehicles that were parked on the street, just to show you the unique thing about 15 McGuire is the driveway is at the absolute end of the street. So anything that's pulled down to the end of the street, and it's just that we can't get out of the driveway. There's just not enough room. So I just wanted to state that. And then the last thing I'll say is 24 units. I believe there's 48 parking spaces maybe a couple of visitor spots. We know there's going to be a gate, so we're not expecting drive-through traffic besides the fire apparatus and emergency vehicles. But when Greg or I have somebody over for a party and we only have 2 spaces in our driveway, we're parking on McGuire on the street. And we apologize, but if it's a bigger group, we go across the street to Charlotte and park over there. I don't live on Charlotte, but I've parked on Charlotte. What's going to happen when these 12 units have holidays, a party, a gathering, and there's no place to park because it's so dense? They're going to park on McGuire and walk down the egress. Why wouldn't they? It's just a street. It's just a neighborhood street. So we will have people visiting this complex parking on McGuire because it's a legally parked street. You can park there, just like we can park on Charlotte. There will be an impact on our street due to the people that live in this complex.
Thank you. I do have one final question. Have you looked at the density of your project, and do you have a possibility to make any sort of modifications to the density of your project currently as it stands?
I would have to talk to my client before I can give you an honest answer.
I mean, you hear what the concerns are, and
I
I
do.
think there's a lot of validity to that, so I think,
We tried to put 10 here,
right,
so that ship sailed.
I understand that.
If I may, on that point, though, the ship that sailed obviously was economic at a much lower density, and I'm having questions in my mind about doubling the density being necessary for economic reasons, and the additional cost you're incurring vis-a-vis McGuire Park and everything else. I mean, it just strikes me as a proposal that is, I'm not going to characterize it one way or the other, but in response to not getting a 10-unit, we're going to go for everything we can. And
Which is, I believe, exactly what was said in the hearing.
well, that was last hearing, and while 40B is certainly very permissive to developers, it's not a blank check to shove everything everywhere to maximize profits. And
That's very true.
So I think, given all the comments that you've heard from the butters tonight, the comments regarding the placement of structures over infiltration systems and the location of infrastructure and the like, I think it would be a strong and thorough answer to the chairman's question would be greatly appreciated. Thanks.
We'll take a look at it. I can state in the affirmative, all the engineering questions, we absolutely can accommodate. As far as the economics, I didn't do that report myself, so I'm actually not qualified to answer you right now. We will relay that to Mr. Lincoln. He was here last time, and hopefully he'll be with us at the next hearing. And even if he's not, we will still get you the information. And then just for the record, it's 40B, so the profits are actually capped by law. He can't maximize his profits. He can only make, I think, 20%. Whereas a conventional subdivision, you can sell a house that we thought was $750,000 for $1.5 million, which has happened recently in Walpole. Good on you. I can't do that here. So, but you've asked a valid question, and we will give you a very good faith answer as to what the economics of this really are.
Thanks.
So, I actually stood up here to continue the hearing.
I have a question, though, Mr. Chairman. I had
Yeah,
a couple questions before you asked for your continuance. I wasn't here 5 years ago, so could we share the 40A plan? I just
It
want to
was in
see.
the original submission. I think you had to include
Was
that
it in the
as part
book?
of it.
All right,
but we can
I'm sorry.
re-forward it.
Okay, I'll look in the booklet. And my other comment was, on the peer review, it recommended the proposed reconstruction of McGuire Park, and then under fire apparatus and turning, it said they would request a condition requiring McGuire Park connection to be constructed and operational prior to issuing a building permit. That's pretty far into the phase, so I don't know what your phasings are going to be, but if this comes to be in some way, shape, or form, I'd like to see that McGuire Park be up and operational a lot sooner than a building permit
We figured
issuance. Okay, thank you.
We'll
Just wanna-
work with Tetra Tech so
Okay.
that we can hopefully proactively answer questions and people aren't guessing.
Okay.
And then if it meets with your approval, great. If not, we'll go back to the drawing board. And again, we're here, on that part, I can tell you, we're here to work with you.
Sorry.
Sure.
Just for clarity on that, the reason we asked for it, we don't want anything constructed or any authorization to construct anything until that access is completely operational. So not an occupancy permit, we're
No,
saying.
not
building-
occupancy building, I understand that, but that's kind of far into, I think, I thought, into the phase of the project. It's more than a phase one.
Yeah, so I would admit, phase one would be constructing the
Okay.
improvements to McGuire Park and the access road. So the
Okay.
very, very first step.
Okay.
Because you can't get into any building construction, any foundation construction, anything that requires a building permit before that.
Thank you.
I would, sorry, can I add one more thing? It was brought to our attention about the air quality, and I know that that's not generated from this particular project, but this parcel does provide some sort of protection of air quality, potentially, and I don't know if that's something that you're strictly reviewing what the information is that they're providing, or if that's something that you can maybe look to add comment to it, or request information regarding.
We can certainly look into that. It is unfortunately, a 40B project, which usually means most of what's on the site is taken out to provide for development, so that there really isn't much left behind. We'd have to look at it a little, I mean, the Certain Teed facility is massive.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's, in comparison to this site, it's massive. So I don't think there's any substantive buffering, but I mean, as it relates to the people in McGuire Park, yeah, it's significant to them without question.
Okay.
How to quantify that, it's a bit difficult. The other questions about environmental issues, that's relatively simple for us to review the DEP database to see what's happened nearby and the history of it. We did it similar for Cedar Edge. So we can review those files in about half an hour and just get a quick summary on that. I'll have a look at the environmental, sort of the issues related to anything coming off a Certain Teed and see if there's prevailing winds or something like that. We can take a quick look at that and
Great.
see if we can offer something substantive.
Thank you.
I was just going to say, so we're actually approaching the end of the public hearing process, so an extension of time is needed along with the continuance.
Okay, yeah, so you wanted to continue till December 6th,
If you have time.
and it would be great if we could extend, extension of time
31st.
maybe till April,
Oh, sure.
April 30th, does that work? Great.
It's fine.
Sorry, what would that April 30th date be?
That's just an extension,
So part of the regulatory process, you have 180 days for the public hearing, so the applicant needs to grant an extension of time to that public hearing process.
it's not necessarily a hearing date, it's just a decision date would have to be met by that
Yeah,
time.
and the board doesn't need to take it all the way to April, but you don't want to be up against your public hearing timeframe.
The next time we'll hear this case will be December 6th. Well,
Yep.
excuse me, if we vote that
Yes.
to be the way. If there's no further comments at the request of the applicant, can I have a motion to continue case number 22-22 until December 6th, as well as grant an extension of time until April 30th, 2024?
So moved.
Moved by Judy. Second by Dave. All this,
Do you need that in a letter, or verbal is good enough?
You can do an email and then we can do a letter.
Okay.
Put in a letter.
I'll send it to you tomorrow.
Thank you.
voting on this will be myself, Dave, Judy, Rob, and Mark. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose, abstain, motion carries. Thank you very much. See you
Thank you.
December 6th. Yeah, take a brief 5-minute recess. Break.
this. Okay.
Our next case is case number 23-17, 104 Main Street, special permit under section 9(3)C of the Walpole zoning bylaws for the expansion of existing parking lot as it relates to a non-conforming use within property zoning district. Properties. This was continued from September 18th. You just state who you are and...
Good evening. My name is Brent Tardif with Ardent Group on behalf of the applicant. So when we left after the last meeting, there were some questions about the getting to the issue of the status of the property in 1957 when the zoning regulations were promulgated. So this document titled Historic Property Status Exhibits is just a collection of some of the stuff I was able to pull together, mostly at the library, a little bit at the assessor's department, and some supplemental historic orthophotographs. So the first item is the 1967 assessor's card, which is the oldest card that I was able to identify with the date on it that depicted the floor plan. And we found that the building was in fact occupied by the residents partially on the first floor. The best knowledge that we had previously was that the whole first floor was a restaurant, but we did have some residential use there at the time. So this assessor's card shows 700 square feet that were devoted to, it's labeled bar on the floor plan. The next exhibit is a newspaper article from the Walpole Times, January 3rd, 2002. It's an interview with the ladies who inherited the restaurant was called Carol's Cafe for many years. And in this newspaper article, they state that that's kind of restating that the first floor was occupied for residential use with the bar room off to the side. So I've highlighted those areas in red. And then the next figure is this is the same orthophotograph that I had presented at the last meeting. The only changes that were made are the numbers in the area calculation box where we're subtracting the area that was dedicated to residential use, which is 1,429 square feet. So that reduced our allowable use to, I should say, our allowable expansion use to 5,463 square feet. The next, let's see. The next four exhibits are excerpts from the Walpole Times again, reporting on various public hearings that had occurred. And I just included these to give some more information regarding how far back the restaurant use dated. There was also a question as to when the gas station use at the property ceased. And the last time there was a reference to a filling station permit was in 1950. The 1956 and the 1958 editions made no mention of a filling station permit, so it seems that the filling station had ceased occupying the property before the 1957 regulations came in place. And then the last 8 through 12 are a series of orthophotographs showing the status of the open area on the north side of the property. There seem to be some questions as to whether or not, that people seem to remember that was wooded at some point. And it looks like if you go through the series, 1960, 1969, 1978, 1980, through the 90s, that had remained open historically. And Yeah, so this is just to kind of explain how we came up with our new expanded area, which is shown on sheet 2 of the plan. We've reduced it to 11 spaces. The total expanded area is 4,900 square feet, which is less than our allotted amount, or potentially allotted amount of 5,463. And there is an issue with this plan. I had a miscommunication with the engineer. I had asked him to eliminate the handicap spot that's located adjoining the building to the south and replace that with space number 2. Space number 1 should still be a van accessible space, so that's a change I need to have them make. So the final version of this would be number 1 is a van accessible space and number 2 is a standard handicap space.
So you mentioned the accessible space to the south of the building right on the corner. That's being eliminated, or did I miss that?
Yes, yeah, there were some concerns about individuals having to back out onto Bullard Street to leave that space, so.
Okay, sir, I don't have any more comments. I don't know if anyone on the board has any questions or comments. Judy?
I think I brought this up the last time, the last meeting, and I'm going to beat the dead horse, but I'd just like to hear this out. I really think that the controlling factor in this is the 67-seat liquor license that was issued by the Town of Walpole Select Board. And 67 divided by 4 is 17 spaces, okay? They have 18 existing now. Anything beyond that isn't allowed by, is not allowed by the parking code. 93C, which I read in its entirety, I believe, last time, refers to increasing up to 50% if you're increasing the size of the building, which you're not increasing the size of the building, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I really feel that they should have filed under 84C, which is still a special permit before this board, but it's to allow this board to grant less than the minimum or more than the maximum under Section 2 of our bylaws, a special permit. And I don't know how you can go against the licensing board of the town, which is the selectmen, override that we're going to override, and then suddenly now give 50% more of something that isn't even happening. I disagree that we count the square footage of the property plus the square footage of the building itself. And so I don't feel like we're on solid ground. I know, sometimes the smallest things get discussed for hours. I know that, I've been around. But I really don't feel like this is the right section. I think it needs to be looked at by other eyes, like Copeland and Page or something, because I just don't feel that way.
I think we talked about this before. The
We did.
parking code for this is 3. There is no maximum for that parking code. There's only a minimum. So 84C really wouldn't be applicable unless they were going below the minimum threshold. There's no set maximum for this use. It very clearly states that in parking code 3.
C, the Board of Appeals may grant a special permit to allow less than the minimum or more than the maximum parking requirement upon petition from an applicant pursuant to Section 2 of the zoning bylaw.
But
So,
there's no maximum. If they're going under the minimum, then sure, it would require a special permit. But for this use,
we
there is
we
no
did this
maximum.
with a case already on the corner of East and Main. They were short a parking space. When they
That-
redirected the lot, the entrance to the lot,
That was
they gained a
different-
space, so they withdrew their application under 84C. So.
There was but there was a set requirement. They were below the requirement
Okay.
for that use. This one, they meet the requirement, but they're allowed to go beyond that because there is no cap for that use.
Okay, but I'm going to still stick to the 67 and the 17 spaces, which they have 18.
Okay.
I'm going to stick to that because state law is state law. And our local board is the licensing. I did it myself years ago. We were the issuing board for the licenses for the ABC. 67 seats gives them 17 spaces.
I'll let the building commissioner.
Maybe, yeah, Mr. Commissioner, can you provide some correspondence to that?
Through the board, Jim Crowley, Building Commissioner. On the parking, to the case that Ms. Conroy is speaking of, it's actually Mr. Murphy's building on the corner of East and Main. Under that section, under Section C, is minimum maximum. For residential use, he needed 18 spots. He only had 17. So he came to you for that, the same as 94 West came in and 1034 East, those big residential buildings. They requested through this board to reduce the parking. That's because you have to have a minimum of 2 spots per living unit. When it comes to restaurants, if we take, say, Raven's Nest in the centre of town, the requirements for Raven's Nest is 0 parking. So they don't need special permit. It's 0 in the centre of town. So Raven's Nest Tessie's has no parking. Crisp has probably 7, 8 spots. He's not required in the CBD. In this zone, when it comes to parking, it goes on the restaurant, as Mr. Shane said, and it goes per, if you have mixed use of tables and chairs moving, it's 4. If it's benches, it's a different requirement. It's against the bar, it's a different requirement. There's a minimum count you have to meet. If they could not, again, if it's brand new, they have to meet the minimum. If they do not, they do come before this board and ask for a waiver if they didn't have the room. But to go past it, they can put 10 spots past it, 2 spots past it, or go 50 spots. I'd point to, if everyone here in town knows it, the Beacons on Route 1. They have a huge lot, I believe, close to probably 200 parking spots. You could have an absolute festival in the bar, but you can't. As for the liquor license, the number that's the 67 actually does not come from the liquor board, it comes from the building department. And that comes through the multiple codes of the size of the building, the use of the building, the amount of doors you have, and the bathrooms count you have. So just give you a quick, not to bore you to death with it, if you have, say, a 600 square foot building and you put tables and chairs in there, roughly it's 15 square feet per person. So 4 people at a table is 60 square feet. You do a 6,000 square foot building, you're allowed 100 people in there. But if you only have 1 door, that 100 people drops down to 50 people. And then if you've only 1 bathroom, you drop down to 30. So and then sprinkler, travel distance, it's a whole. So the number of 67 comes from the building department, not actually any other department, because the bathrooms lock out how many people you have. The size, the table configuration locks out what it is. When it comes to liquor license, it goes to the ABCC first, and then it comes back to the select board for them to approve it, say, we allow it in our town. Liquor license go on footprint. So if you have a bar, say if this room was a bar, their liquor license will be the description of the size of the room, 20 foot by 50 foot long, bar in this corner, tables and chairs. It goes on the footprint. If you wanted to put, so take the Beacons again, just for an example, their liquor license was the building. 2 years ago, they done that nice patio on the outside. They had to go back to the ABCC and request an extension of premises, is what it's called. And they had to incorporate, say, 200 extra square feet. The configuration and the footprint is what the liquor license. Liquor licenses are not based on number of people or number of occupants. That number comes from the building department. If that makes sense.
No.
That makes sense, but it's still stamped final approval by the selectmen, so that's the
Yes.
number, 67. I know it comes from the building department based on all those things you just
Yes.
mentioned. So if this building was built in 1918, And the section at the front of our book that talks about 1925 bylaws adopted, where does this building fall into that place? Is it's okay because it was prior to 25, so it needs to conform?
No, so again, it depends on what you're going for. So back in 1925, it was a gas station, I believe. I believe the gentleman said it was a gas station up to 1950. Zoning laws change, requirements change, state laws change. So if the state brought in, back in, again, 1800s, you could have a bar. All you served was alcohol, no food, a bar. That's allowed. Today, you cannot actually have a bar. You have to have a food with it. You cannot open a bar in town that just sells alcohol and nothing else. You have to have food with it. That's the ABCC. That's a state law. And we have a town ordinance too that says you want a bar, you're serving food. You can't just serve alcohol. So as the laws change, if the state succeeded, it's a moving target. But from what's there and what's there approved now, and the liquor license they got, they were approved by what the square footage was. So when it goes to the state, an actual number doesn't go to the state. When it comes back to the town, the select board usually they're approving something, they'll approve what the plans are based on. So you can, again, just give an example, Tessie's is doing an extension at the moment. Their liquor license has been approved by the select board and is based on the occupancy number that the building department gave them. And we've already done it through, again, bathroom size, sprinkler, not sprinklered, amount of exit doors. So the select board do state the number they're allowed to have because of what the building department have said. This is what state law says you're allowed to have for seating. But the liquor license and license itself, that's a town put in that writing. They don't have to put in a number because a liquor license goes on your footprint of what it is, not actually the count.
Okay. I just still feel that it's wrongly filed, and it should have been 84C. And I'd like an opinion on that. I don't know if I'm going to get any support on it, but that's where I'm standing, so.
Yeah, again, under the Section 8, it says if they're altering for either maximum or minimum. The applicant's actually not asking for anything because they're not going to have the minimum, and there is no maximum on this section. Some of our sections do have a maximum minimum, and that's when they come to the board, but on this, there is no max. If they bought a lot next door and this was say a resident, or my apologies, if this was a business area and they bought the 3 lots around them, leveled the house and paved and put 100 parking spaces there, they're still only allowed 67 people. So they can put as many cars as they want in the entire neighborhood. They still can only have 67 people in that restaurant.
Well, I guess that's my point. You just made it. 67 people can be in that facility.
Mm-hmm.
And they have the minimum, I'm going to call it a minimum, because to me it's a minimum, because it's been there. And then the clear cutting of the lot, quote, to expand by a prior owner with fees collected or not, I have no idea, should have been, but is it to me, it's just, you just explained it very well. They want to add more spaces. They already have what they have.
So they meet the minimum without coming to this board. If they were brand new, they're existing, so they don't have to. But if this was brand new and they'd have to come before this board if they want to go below the minimum, they meet the minimum. The minimum threshold is not extremely strong. So just to give an example, if everybody here, we're all happy and we all decide to go for a drink after the meeting, everyone here is taking their own personal car. So you're going to have 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 if I'm invited, people going to the bar. You have 9 individual cars just for 9 people. So again, if you come as a group, that's different. But if you go and meet your friends and there's 9 vehicles going, it's 9 spots. This bar is allowed 67. If 67 people decide to come all on their own, that's 67 parking spaces needed. But the code, our zoning, does not require 67 spots. It requires a minimum. There is no maximum.
Okay, well, I'm still going with 9(3)(c), talks about expansion of a building and then more parking. So that's either.
So 9(3)(c) falls under non-conforming uses.
And it speaks to, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, it speaks to buildings. and footprints.
Ground area.
So it states alteration, expansion, extension of a non-conforming use shall be allowed by special permit if the alteration, extension, or expansion does not increase the total of the floor area plus the open ground area of the premise devoted to the use more than 50%. Any increase in size will be measured against the total floor area plus the open ground area that existed at the time the use became non-conforming. This reason shall be allowed to, this applies to agricultural or horticultural. There is no mention of, it's the expansion of a use. It doesn't say building anywhere. So you can expand the use. So your use could be, again, that's why it doesn't apply to farming because of agricultural, but if this was an outdoor market and you had a farmer's market every week and all you had was tables and people set up stalls and took them away at the end of the day and they were using the footprint of the ground and you want to expand that, it's the use you're expanding. That's why actually our zoning in this town is actually pretty well and was actually ahead of some other towns and state law as well on some cases. We've divided into non-conforming use, non-conforming building and non-conforming lot. So we've split them completely different. If they were going for the expansion of a non-conforming building, this building would have to be non-conforming due to side yard, front yard or rear yard setback. That when it goes to a non-conforming building. If it's gone non-conforming lot, it goes on the lot size. But in this case, it's the use these gentlemen are going for because it's a residential area with a restaurant in it. The use is an A use. That's the use that's non-conforming, which is the building, the parking space. It's not just a building, and the use is not locked into a building. It's locked into the lot. So it's like zoning. You're in a residential A. The use in that district is residential. It doesn't say that. So if you come for it, and again, if you're residential, we have residential. If you want to look at across from Howards and Vos on Washington Street, you have all those houses on the left-hand side. That's a limited manufacturing zone. So those houses are a non-conforming use. So if anybody in that neighborhood ever wanted to, say, add a bedroom, add on a new bathroom or just a sunroom, they would have come before this board and ask for an expansion of a non-conforming use, which is a single-family home, because they're in the LM district.
I understand. I don't know. I mean, I guess everyone's entitled to their own opinions on whether or not they agree with that, but I think the explanation meets the criteria, but is there any other comments or questions anyone had for building commissioner?
Not for the
Or
building commissioner,
applicant,
thanks.
sorry.
I believe there was discussion at the prior meetings about having meetings with the butters and folks across the street, and I don't know if you can speak to any of those meetings and how the project may have changed as a result of that.
Yeah, my coworker Joe, who had attended the first two meetings, had met with some of the abutters and neighbors. We had talked about offering to build a fence along, but it would have been off the property. It was determined to not fall under the auspices of this process, basically. Some of the other things that impacted the way the project changed are that we included a note on the plan that the patio area will be enclosed with solid panels instead of lattice to reduce some of the noise. They all kind of had more to do with mitigating the impacts that are there right now, regardless of whether this parking expansion happens.
Okay. Thanks.
Is there any other comments before I open it up? Sorry, were you going to say something else?
Oh, no, sorry.
Oh, all right.
I have a question. In your original proposal, what was the request for parking spaces originally? I think you've reduced.
We started at, I believe it was 16 when we first started.
So we've gone from 16 to 11?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tim or Mark, do you have anything? No? I'm good. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak?
Paul Quinn, 12 Christina Drive in Arbutta. And then in answer to your question, Mr. Major, we did have a meeting and there was a fence discussed. It was a generous offer to put a fence on our side. But then it was too gray, like who would put up the fence or who would maintain the fence? Did they have permission from the state? Because it's right on the right-of-way of 1A. So it just didn't work out. It was fair enough. And it also didn't address my concerns with the nighttime noise, because they said, the fence blocks the noise, which 1A traffic, but then the parking lot noise comes right up into my window when you hear all the people. And actually, like the last 2 weeks has been car alarms, to be honest with you, if I had a complaint. And so if my car alarm's going off, everybody knows because I'm embarrassed. And apparently if you're in a restaurant and the car alarm goes off, you just let it cycle through, and maybe it cycles through again because whatever happened. But, so, to Mrs. Conroy's point, it almost doesn't even seem like they need the extra parking spaces. And then they have the patio, which was licensed for 18 spots, and we've been documented there's 40 seats out there. So if they complied with what they have, do they need even these extra spots? So that's my brother's gonna talk about the zoning, but I just think it's a detriment to the whole, and as the building commissioner said, it's a residential neighborhood that they're going into. And so I couldn't do it, and so, but, they can with bringing the noise. So that's my point. And then we're still gonna discuss this zoning, if that's, my brother's gonna speak.
Thank you.
Good evening again. My name is Robert Quinn. I'm the brother of Paul. My fourth appearance here. Taking a little bit out of the brotherly love here, coming all these times, but I appreciate the applicant has recognized that not all the space in 1979 and earlier in 1967 was used for the business of a bar restaurant. And so he has started down the right path. I think he has not gone down completely. And so with that, I'd like to show you my analysis following on basically what he has done and adding on to that. So if I could. Yeah, for everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Today? Thank you.
So the applicant has recognized that the building, basically 700 feet of it was used for the bar back when it was a non-conforming use. So that's another 1,400 square feet of the building that was not used for restaurant purposes. Instead was used for residential purposes that can't be counted. But he doesn't take into account other areas on the property. There's a garage on the property, some 400 square feet of a garage. It's pretty clear to me that that garage was there not for a bar, but instead was there for residential purposes. There's a driveway to that garage. Again, there's another approximately 400 feet of land there. Again, not used for the bar, but instead was used for the residential purposes. Beyond between the garage and the neighboring property, the border of the property, there's space there. Again, not used for the bar, but was used basically for the residential property. So all those spaces were not used for the bar and should not be counted when we determine what the base is to then apply the 50% rule. Also, the applicant didn't recognize the fact that they expanded this restaurant by some 625 feet, and I apologize to the board. There was a slight error in the calculations there, which is I used 675 instead of 625. But that space was not
incorporated into the applicant's calculations, that additional 625 feet that this board allowed for the patio area for an expansion of the restaurant into that area. There's also area along Bullitt Street on the backside of what was then the residence that was not used, I would suggest to you, for the bar, but instead was used for the residential area. All these parcels of property on this lot have to be deducted from the starting point of their 13,711 feet. So we deduct that to determine how much was actually used for the bar. And the maximum amount of space that was used for the bar going back is some 10,000 square feet. 50% of that 10,000 square feet is some 5,000 square feet. You take off the square footage of where the bar has been expanded over the years, which is all those individual items that is now being used for the bar purposes. You take out that, which is some 3,600 feet, and you get down to basically some 1,500 square feet that is allowable today for this parking lot to expand. 1,500 feet. That's the amount. That's the math amount. This plan that is in front of you today, the modified plan, is way over 1,500 feet, and I would respectfully suggest to you that it should be denied. That's the math. This property has been expanded. It started as a 700-foot bar. It was a non-conforming use at that point, and now expanding it to use some 1,300 square feet, they say. That's not 50%. That's way over 50%. It's the citizens, we'd like to come to a nice settlement between us and the applicant, but it's actually the citizens of Walpole that are not being, that have to be taken into account as well. They're the ones that have approved the zoning bylaws of this town. They're the ones that have said the 50% rule is applied, and it's to be applied from when it became non-conforming, which all of us now agree was when it was a 700-foot bar. And we're now looking at 13,000 square feet used for this commercial purpose. That's not right. And I would respectfully suggest that you deny the application. Thank you.
May I ask a question? May I ask a question? A couple? So looking at the revised plans, the net new area that's shown is 4,900 square feet. And according to your chart, the 50% of this 1979 restaurant area was 5,000. So if we were going off of that, this is below the 5,000. And so your issue really is that the prior expansions of the bar allow now for a greater expansion because of the previous expansions. Is that essentially what it comes down to?
I'm not sure if I fully understand. But the prior expansions that have happened have to be counted toward that 50%.
Well, before we get, but that's fundamentally what your issue is. If I look at your chart here, 50% of the 1975 area is a little over 5,000. What's shown
Correct.
is 4,900. So if that were the right number, the plan is okay. But what you're saying is the prior expansions should be deducted from the 5,000.
Correct.
So, expansions that aren't, there's a statute of limitations, and currently under 40A, if expansions that either were not in conformance with zoning or weren't done pursuant to a building permit are treated as not legally non-conforming. So the timing of those expansions, if they were far enough back in time, they sort of, by operation of law, become legally non-conforming.
Correct. I mean, I'm not trying to reverse what has happened in the past.
Right.
I'm saying today, we're looking at how much can this property expand? How much can this use expand? And you have to look at the history. You have to look at the history as to what was conforming back or non-conforming back at the time, and then you have to say what expansions of the non-conforming use have occurred over the years.
Right, but if they themselves are legally non-conforming, aren't they also to be treated as though they're part of the non-conforming use today? In other words,
Well, yeah, absolutely, but the ordinance says you look at the time when they became non-conforming, when the use became non-conforming. This use became non-conforming either in, I think it was 1947 or 1956, when there was a revision to your zoning map. And when that happened, it was non-conforming. Now, it's difficult to put back the history, obviously, to get a precise number, but the applicant has tried, I have tried, to present as much of the information that we've gathered over this period of time. And we've seen that this business has expanded considerably while it was a non-conforming use. And today, you have to take into account that expansion when you make a consideration as to how much how much future expansion of the use can be allowed. Otherwise, you're just going to be, if you look at all these at prior expansions and start with today's number, you're not, number one, following the bylaw, and number two, it would make that 50% rule inoperable, because they come back, and then they add on this expansion. 2 years from now, they come back and say, all this space is non-conforming, we want 50% of that space.
No.
You just can't, it makes that ineffective.
Well, that wouldn't be possible, because you would already have it would have already been agreed upon. So if they would have come back after the fact, after the board would have granted that decision, then you're right, they would have taken away their 50% from that legal decision.
Yeah.
So they wouldn't come back
Well,
afterwards.
if you're looking at what is non-conforming today,
Yeah.
you're making your decision, then then 2 years from now, you're gonna be looking at what is non-conforming 2 years from now. And when you're looking at that decision, then you would be,
Yeah, please.
So speaking to the non-conformities, they're basing their expansion on what's not conforming today, which is 50%. If this board approves that 50%, well, actually 35%, I believe, but if you approve their expansion, if you were to, that becomes conforming by our zoning, so they can't add that on to that non-conformity. That's what's there today. It's getting approved now, even though it's a non-conforming use. It's still a non-conforming use, but cannot be expanded on anymore, because they're going to use up to the 50%. To Mr. Quinn's bill, if we go back to the very beginning of this and go back to when the non-conformity was created, that's actually more detrimental to the neighbourhood, because if we go back to the original start, prior to 1956, that entire lot was a business use, and we had its own business. The town changed it in 1956 to residential, which means by default the entire lot is non-conforming, which would mean the applicant doesn't need a special permit. They can pay for the entire lot, because the entire lot is non-conforming. The town created non-conformity when we changed it from a business use to a residential area. So we have maps back in, I believe Mr. Quinn got it from engineering as well, and I got a copy from Mr. American. In 1947, that entire lot was business. In 56, it was changed to residential. So by us changing it to residential, the whole entire lot is non-conforming. I wouldn't recommend going back that far, because then they're paving everything. We stick to what's non-conforming now, and if the board either say no to it, that's the decision. If they say yes to it, whatever you say yes to cannot be used down the road to say, well, now we're adding the extra 13 spots, we want to go 50% bigger again. That's a cap, it's done, it can't be used anymore.
Appreciate that. Sorry. Is there any questions?
just, do we have any idea when those expansions occurred, the dates on them? Or
That's the one that.
So some expansions we do, unfortunately, some of them were done in error. So by us doing it in error, it became non-conforming as well. Some of them were done interior, so we have permits for, say, they cut a doorway into the kitchen, they've moved stuff around, but because it was interior, it was allowed to be done.
Yep.
There's no exterior expansion. I did find, after Mr. Chair last meeting asked me to look into it, say on the handicap parking and on the ramp, because Mr. Quinn had said the ramp was going the wrong way. They actually had gone, the previous owner with Engineer Chu had gone to the state board, AAB board for handicap accessibility, and got a variance to be allowed to put the ramp that way. So they were allowed to do the ramp that way, then they reversed it from the way it originally was. But all the expansions inside, and at that time they also mentioned that there was an office upstairs and that was going to be a private office, so it's noted that that was, upstairs was also turned into commercial whenever it was. There's no record that we can find. Unfortunately, we get it with a lot of things that it's been chopped and changed, and we deal with right now, people are selling their houses, making good money, and have completely finished basements. And unfortunately, you're telling them pull the whole thing apart to get inspected, so I'm not really popular lately. But that's what happens. Over the years, it's been chopped and changed, and there's no way of proving that when it kicked in unless we have a permit or a violation notice that was sent out, and I've checked our files, we've nothing on that.
Okay, thank you.
Respond to that, thank you. What we do know is that in 1967, which is the assessor's card that the applicant has presented to you, that only 700 square feet of that building was commercial. And we know that in 1967, it was zoned residential. So it was a non-conforming use in 1967. 700 square feet of it was used for the restaurant bar use. The rest of the building was not used for restaurant bar. And that's the basis. Basically, I had some assessors' records from 1979, which basically confirmed what the applicant has presented to you, which again shows that just that bar room, which is the furthest north, there are three sections basically to the building. That section furthest to the north is the only section that was used for the use of a restaurant or bar. And so since then, and again, the applicant wants you to then take the fact that all the exterior, all the land mass was used for commercial purposes. I think that's a jump that's, frankly, you can't make on your own, number one. And number two, the evidence is against that. You have to have parking for residents, you have space for residents and all that. To just assume that all that space was going to be commercial, I think is an erroneous assumption by the applicant, and not one to be taken by this board.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public want to speak? Excuse me. Sure.
Ruby and Jordan, 11 Christina Drive. I've been before you. This is the third time. Thank you for listening to me all these times that I've been here. But listening tonight, especially when you go into the bars and restaurants that are on Route 1 or in downtown, that's a different area that we're talking about. It's not residential, where you have homes across the street and you have homes in back of the parking lot. And this restaurant, since we've started this, has calmed down, but again, as I said the last time, and I'm saying again this time, that, it got pretty wild there, and now they want more parking. And they're gonna say, and they've said, it's been a tough business for the pandemic. We're over the pandemic. This is 2023. So everybody's got back to their way of life. The restaurant should be able to sustain on its own as a bar, sleepy bar, like it did before. But if you put in more spaces there, there's going to be more big parties when the weather gets nice and warm again. And it's not going to be really nice for the residential people in that neighborhood. We pay plenty of taxes for our homes. that are assessed at a large amount of money. And at least we'd like some quiet at night. And everybody deserves to have a party, but everybody needs to understand that this is a district of homes, not an area like Route 1, that it's a playground for everybody. So I hope you would keep that in your minds when you make your decision. And thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Is there anyone else that'd like to speak? Is there any comments or questions from the board? Yep.
I know my request of extra opinion probably went on deaf ears, so I'm going to make a motion to request an opinion from town council to clarify this case under, the filing of this case under section 84C, which I believe it should be, versus 93C. Can someone second so we can discuss, please? Or not?
There's a motion before the board.
Procedurally.
I guess I don't see a second, so I don't know that we can move forward with that.
Okay. Thank you.
Applicant, if there's no further comments or current requests, you mind standing up to the podium? Would you like to close the hearing tonight?
Yes, we would, please. Thank you.
Okay. At the request of the applicant, can I have a motion to close the case, the hearing for the case number 23-17?
So can I ask one question?
Yep.
So I know you said you gotta still revise the plans, right? Because of the parking spot.
Yes.
Does that require that we can't
I
vote
thought
on
it was
these
to
plans?
condition it.
Yeah, you can do that. You're talking about the
If you're
handicap
comfortable
parking
with
spot,
that.
correct?
Yes, just the two
I have,
ADA compliant
number one-
spaces. So
number-
one will be a van accessible space, and two will be standard.
Right,
And
and you're
the-
gonna
and the space
remove-
at the, yes, at the space to the south of the building will not be accessible, just a
Correct.
standard space.
So the lot labeled 1, I mean, that parking spot's labeled 1 would be van accessible?
Correct.
And then 2 would just be standard
Correct.
accessible? All right.
Does that answer you? Are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, I just
Okay.
didn't know if we could
Mr.
vote
Chairman?
on it.
Yep.
We had an applicant give us some information, I mean, a butter on behalf of a butter. Is anyone going to want to take a look at this to?
I feel comfortable with the
Proof
explanation
positive.
that was provided by the commissioner, as well as the applicant. I appreciate the comments from the abutters, but at this time, I'm ready to make a ruling. If other members don't feel that way, we can certainly continue to postpone or ask for a continuance, but it's been requested by the applicant to close the hearing. I don't know if I can do much more than that.
Okay, well, I'm not comfortable with taking a vote tonight, and it's unfortunate that he wants to close the hearing.
Yeah, we haven't closed it yet, right?
No.
There's a motion on the board.
There's a motion on the board right now. It hasn't been moved or... Yeah, you can speak.
1 second. I guess just, it's gonna take the vote and it's gonna go through. If I could get it conditioned, I mean, I've seen what they did with the patio. If we can get it conditioned so they can't park cars like all haphazardly, I mean, there's 10 line spots, which looks good, but then if you're in there and those 10 spots are taken, you're just gonna hop a spot anywhere. So towards the north side of the parking lot, and even along that fence, if they can make it with landscaping or maybe even another fence, so that they can't park all over the place and put 15 or 20 cars in there.
Yep.
I
we can
would
make that.
appreciate that.
Thank you. We have a motion in front of the board at the request of the applicant to motion to close the hearing for case number 23-17. Could I please have a Motion?
So moved.
Moved by Dave Anderson,
Second?
second by Rob Fitzgerald. I don't believe you are allowed to vote. I think Rob was...
Oh, you were right.
You know,
Sorry about
you
that.
are right.
Oh,
The
okay.
voting members will be Dave Anderson, myself, Judy Conroy, Tim Haler, and Mark Major. So is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mark. All this in favor of closing the hearing, please say aye. Aye. Oppose?
Opposed?
Abstain? 4 to 1. Motion carries. Can I please have a motion for case number 23-17, 104 Main Street, to grant a special permit for the expansion of existing parking lot as shown on the Ginny Van Group drawing set dated (10/31/2023) with the conditions of parking space number 1, be van accessible. Parking space number 2, be a regular handicap space. The removal of handicap parking space at the southern corner of the property, as well as condition all vehicles be parked within striped spaces on the lot.
Can I just add, in front of the building where they put 3 spaces running parallel to the handicap ramp, it's not going to be striped, but
There's all bollards there on the drawings.
to where? Okay, so that'll take up the vehicle space? Okay.
So moved.
Moved by Dave, second by Mark. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Oppose?
No.
Abstain? 4 to 1, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is meeting minutes. I know we have a couple of them, but John's not being here. I'd probably feel better voting on the minutes when John's present.
It's okay.
If that's all right.
Fine. Do you want to do all 3 on the 20th?
Yeah,
Okay.
assuming John will be here, yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry?
Is there any additional comments by anyone? Motion?
Oh, I did have a question. On the waivers on the Ponset,
Yeah.
you know how you blanked, you put on what the law is and what they're asking for? Could you fit a way to put what our rule is that they're asking the waiver from, other than just the number?
So, yeah, so what they submitted, I guess I can relay that to them. Usually when we do like the decision, I'll lay it out specifically, like, here's the waiver request, here's what it is, here's what they're requesting, and then usually in the past, the applicant will provide the reasoning with that. So are you talking about like what?
I'd like to see what they're asking from, you know, setback is, they're what, 17, and it should be.
Yep.
They're just citing the number.
They're just saying the number. Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
can convey that to them, yeah, make sure they do that.
Well, I didn't know if that, because that was on your report, so I didn't know if
Yeah.
it's something you could do.
Yep, yeah, we'll do, absolutely.
Have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.